Let's begin by thinking about let's consider the leading causes of death worldwide, across the world. So we see that right on top is ischemic heart disease, followed by stroke, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So that's just your airways being constricted and you not being able to have as much gas exchange of oxygen. Lower respiratory infections, the list continues, neonatal conditions, lung cancer, Alzheimer's disease, various diseases due to kidney, diabetes, diarrheal diseases. All the causes of death lead to about 60 million people dying every year worldwide. So there are 60 million deaths worldwide. Of these, 7 million people are dying prematurely. So they would have lived longer lives, but they're dying earlier because of exposure to air pollution. This is a cause for concern because this is something that we have a control over. We are the ones combusting fossil fuels. We are the ones leading to gas phase pollutants, particle phase pollutants being emitted into the atmosphere. Without our anthropogenic activities, air pollution, there would still be particles in the air. There would still be natural sources of air pollutants. But the degree to which we have affected our atmosphere to have these particulate pollution and the gas phase pollutants is so much that we are seeing 7 million people dying prematurely every year. To put this into perspective of what we faced during the COVID pandemic, in the years 2020 and 2021, 15 million people died either due to indirect or direct causes of COVID. So indirect means that people weren't able to access a hospital because they had pneumonia. So there were indirect reasons why there was a higher mortality rate during those years. Even that combined, the indirect and direct causes due to the COVID pandemic, led to an increase of 15 million deaths over those 2 years. And here we are facing 7 million premature deaths every year due to air pollution. So half of these 7 million deaths can be attributed to outdoor air pollution. That's what we know and understand, the smog, the particles outside, smoke. Half of it is due to indoor air pollution. And that's actually has been my area of research. Here in Pakistan, we still have to deal with our outdoor air pollution. We still have to reduce emissions and improve our outdoor air quality. But the next step, and something that we need to be just aware of and concerned about, because we have several people in our country who are at the poverty level where they are burning solid fuels for cooking and for heating purposes. That burning of fossil fuels indoors, lower quality fuels, leads to pollutants, particle phase and gas phase indoors. People spend on average 80 to 90% of your time indoors. Right now we're indoors. When we're in our car, we're in a closed environment. So given how much duration we have to indoor pollution, the case is that much stronger for that we need to consider that as well. Looking beyond just Pakistan, looking beyond the cities in Pakistan, a third of the world's population uses solid fuels for heating and cooking purposes indoors. So that's something that we need to be concerned about from a global point of view as well. And going back to outdoor air pollution, 90% of the world's population lives in areas where air pollution exceeds the World Health Organization's air guideline values. So 90% of the world is in exceedance. So it's really a global issue. We are driving it home with the smog events over here, but it's really a global issue. What are we talking about when we talk about particulate pollution? So we have gas phase pollutants. This is just gas phase species. But in terms of particles, what size particles are we talking about? So particles can be any size, from sub-nanometer size particles going upwards to tens of micrometers in diameter. What's really a micrometer, physically? So your hair is about 50 to 17 micrometers in diameter. If you break that diameter into 5, you now have a particle which is 10 micrometers in diameter. If you break that further into 4, you now have a particle which is 2.5 micrometers in diameter. PM 2.5 is just the term that we use for particles that are smaller than 2.5 micrometers in diameter. So anything from a few nanometers to 2.5 micrometers is all lumped together in this PM 2.5 term. If we, like I said, particles can be all sizes. If we consider virus particles, those are tens of nanometers in diameter. Combustion will lead to small nuclei formation and can be a few 100 nanometers going up to 1 micrometer in diameter. Whereas mechanical processes like wind erosion and sea spray and just mechanical wind blowing up soil from the ground and construction sites, that leads to the coarse particles that we see in the atmosphere, particles which are smaller than 2.5 micrometers and can be tens of micrometers in diameter, sand and other dust. We are most concerned about PM 2.5 because those particles are small enough to not be removed in the upper airways. So your upper airways have mucus. You keep the mucus dissolves gas phase pollutants and the larger particles and gets cleared into your gastrointestinal tract, goes into your stomach and gets out of your body that way. But the smaller particles will not dissolve into the mucus, will not get impacted on the tracheal and bronchial walls, will go down into the deep lungs to the alveoli, which give this huge area for absorption and have unicellular walls. So it's very easy for those tiny particles to go between the membranes to the bloodstream and then affect distal organs in the body. So it will affect your heart, your brain, and reach other organs that way. Your lungs are equivalent to the size of half the size of a singles tennis court. So that's a huge area for absorption to occur over. And you're breathing in 10 to 25 cubic meters of air every day. So whatever your pollution level is, you're breathing 10 to 25 cubic meters of that air, whether it's indoors or outdoors. All of these lead to various health effects. There have been correlations, there have been sort of some systematic studies which have directly linked exposure to particles to respiratory diseases, to decreased lung function, to aggravations in asthma, to premature death, to genetic mutation. So the metals on particles and other reactive oxygen species on particles, which has been my area of research, have been linked to cancer. And the smaller the particle, the larger the surface area to volume ratio. So there's more surface sites for reactions to occur and for it to interact with your lung tissue. So the smaller particles may have a higher chance for all these toxic chemicals to be on them and just have a higher surface area. So they're of more concern than the larger coarse particles, which is what you see, and you don't necessarily see the smaller ones. But the smaller ones are what may be affecting the death toll more. In Lahore, annual average concentrations of PM 2.5 have been measured to be on the order of 200 micrograms per meter cube. So these are annual averages. So your daily average can be much higher than 200 micrograms per meter cube, can be much lower. But on average, over the whole year, over 365 days of the year, average concentration measured in some studies has been 200 micrograms per meter cube. Let's compare this to what the World Health Organization recommends. 5 micrograms per meter cube. 5 is 40 times less than 200. Pakistan's air quality standards for PM 2.5 annual levels is 15 micrograms per meter cube. Still much, much higher. If that's not enough to convince you, let's compare our exposure to if you're a smoker. We all know that smoking is bad for our health. So every cigarette puff has a PM 2.5 concentration of about 1,000 micrograms per meter cube, depending on the brand of the cigarette. If you average that over your entire intake of air throughout the day, smoking one cigarette per day is equivalent to a PM 2.5 mass concentration of 22 microgram per meter cube. So if we have 200 micrograms per meter cube from outdoor air pollution, and we compare that to what we would have exposed ourselves to with smoking one cigarette, it's about 10 times that. So even if you're a non-smoker and you're just sitting outside, or you're sitting indoors with the windows open and the pollution from outdoors is coming inside, you are exposing yourself to PM 2.5. I mean, cigarettes have nicotine and tar and a bunch of other things, but in terms of PM 2.5, exposure to PM 2.5, that's much higher with just sitting in Lahore's air. Where are these particles coming from? Let's go into the science a little bit and to what forms these particles. So I mentioned that the coarse mode, the larger particles can be suspended in the atmosphere due to wind erosion, churning up of particles from the ground, and sea spray, things like volcanic dust, things like that. It's these small ones, this tallest peak, this nuclei mode. Those are gas phase molecules reacting with each other. So consider oxygen. An oxygen molecule is 0.3 nanometers in diameter. So it's just a gas phase molecule. It reacts with a hydrocarbon molecule and forms something which is on the order of, let's say, 1 nanometer across. That clumps into, collides with another such oxidized hydrocarbon molecule. Slowly, they will, at a few nanometers, the gas phase species will condense into a solid phase. It's now has a mass which does not let it be suspended in air, so it's no longer gas phase. It becomes a solid, tiny solid particle. That's the nuclei. That has a huge surface area. More gas phase species can absorb onto it. Sulfur dioxide can absorb. Other species can absorb more hydrocarbons, volatile organic carbons, other NOx, form a larger and larger particle. That grows in size up to about 1 micrometers in diameter, after which it can settle out. These tiny particles can go across large distances in the atmosphere. They're small, so they don't sediment out. And they can have all these toxic pollutants adsorbed onto them because they're so highly reactive. That happens all the year round. So even during the summer months, you have the emission of these pollutants. That's shown on the schematic on the left, where you'll have sunlight warming the ground, which warms the air above it, which warms the air above it. So you'll have a decreasing temperature profile as you go higher and higher above the ground. Cold air tends to come down, warm air goes up. So that mixing allows for the pollutants to be mixed over a greater depth of the atmosphere under normal conditions. During winters, during temperature inversion conditions, what's happening, especially at night, is that the ground cools radiatively. So the ground will cool and will cool the air just above it. But because it's cooled radiatively, it will not cool the air above that. So that layer above is warmer than the layer just above the Earth's surface. This layer of warm air traps the cold air layer underneath. That cold air layer is where all your cars are emitting their exhausts, power plants, and all your emissions are taking place in this cold air underneath. And this warm air is effectively acting like a lid on top of it. So that is what causes the trapping of pollutants and this increase in pollutants during temperature inversion conditions. So what happens in fossil fuel combustion in cars? You have nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, ozone being emitted. Let's consider what happens with sulfur. So smoke will have carbon monoxide and unoxidized fuel particles and oxidized impurities such as sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide is acidic, so it reduces the pH of smoke. That low pH has a higher affinity for water, so the acidic molecule has wants water to absorb onto it. That effectively increases the size of the nuclei particle because now water is absorbed onto it, grows the size of that particle, makes thicker fog. The thicker the fog, the lesser the chance for sunlight to evaporate the water off of that particle. Hence, even during daylight hours, you will have the continuation of the smog. So not just being limited at night, but then continuing because of the thicker fog, because of the sulfur dioxide, increasing the affinity for water. So we understood the chemistry a little bit, but where are these emissions coming from in Lahore? What are the sources? Car vehicles, motor vehicle exhaust is number one. There have been some studies which have been done on source apportionment. That's what it's called, where they use tracers to see what percentage of the mass is coming from which source. So there's tracers for car exhaust versus coal burning versus biomass burning. And motor vehicle emissions are lead to more than half of the mass on PM 2.5 and PM 10. This study was for both. And followed by biomass burning, followed by coal combustion, brick kilns burn low quality fuels, which are then lead to the mass on PM 2.5. And similarly, another study has also found that about 2/3 of the mass on PM 2.5 can be attributed to carbonaceous emissions. So fossil fuel combustion has been a major factor leading to high particle concentrations. On the left is the picture of London. One would not think that there would have been such high air pollution events in Western countries, right? I mean, this is a problem that developing countries face, but this is a problem which has been a global problem. This is from 1952, so several decades back. But this smog event led to over 4,000 deaths. And the particle concentrations during this smog event were 1,600 micrograms per meter cube. So here I am talking about 200 micrograms per meter cube being bad, but during that smog event in London, it was 1,600 micrograms per meter cube for all particle concentrations, so not just PM 2.5, to total suspended particles. And then the picture on the right is a town near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's from 1948, where a similar winter smog event led to, that picture is actually being taken at night, and it looks as if, it's been taken during the day, and it looks as if it's nighttime over there. This is Lahore last November, where on several days, the air quality was poor enough that Lahore's air quality was worse than New Delhi's even. And on those days, Lahore was labeled the world's most polluted city in the world. This is really a cause for concern. If we don't all come together and work towards reducing our emissions from car exhaust. It's great that the government is implementing burn bans on biomass burning. More needs to be done because there's just, we all need to put in our effort by creating awareness, by having this awareness of it's not just the particles that you can see, it's these gas phase emissions. Even if you can't see emissions, it'll stay in that milieu and react and form particles. Hopefully with growing awareness and images such as this, something will be done. Thank you.